Have you heard of the cloud repatriation movement? This is a movement that's been growing the last couple of years of people, businesses, organizations moving workloads back from the cloud to on-premises. And why? Well, there's a myriad of reasons why. From things like cost concerns to complexity to latency issues and lots more. So on today's episode of SysAdmin Weekly, I've got Eric Siren on, and we're going to be talking about the cloud repatriation movement, what it means for you, how you and your business can adapt, and what it means for the industry at large. So that and lots more in today's episode of SysAdmin Weekly. It's a new week. That means it's time for SysAdmin Weekly. This is the podcast brought to you by sysadmins for sysadmins, and it's dedicated to those tireless tech folks that are working in the trenches day in and day out to keep our digital world spinning. I'm your host, Andy Serwich, and I'm joined by my co-host. I've got Eric Siren. How's it going, Eric?
Good. How you doing, Andy?
Doing good. Hey, I had our good friend Paul Schneckenberg on for the last couple of episodes. It was good to talk to him, but it's good to have you back as well, too. So we're talking about what do I want to say? An interesting subject today. Maybe a bit of a controversial subject. And I didn't even know it was called this until I started researching this episode. And that is the cloud repatriation movement. And so basically it breaks down to, who is moving stuff back from the cloud and why. So, I think it's an interesting topic because everything we've heard for the last 10, 15 years now is cloud, cloudy cloud, right? And so the fact that there's this movement now of, workloads being pulled back to on-premises data centers, it's interesting to me. Very interesting. So we're going to dive into that in this episode today. But before we get that, first I wanted to get to our News React segment. And after that, I don't know what I'm calling the geeky segment. I'm just calling it Nerd Hour for now. It's not going to take a whole hour, but, those nerdy things that we're working on. But anyway, Eric, I want to start with you. When we talk about news items that are going on in the industry. This episode is recorded on May 25th, 2025. And so what's a recent news item that's come across your desk that really caught your eye?
I am not going to swear I saw this as a news item or if I saw it as like a personal retelling of events. So let's couch it with that. I think we've all by now heard about the major layoffs done at Microsoft. And one of the things that hit me quick on this is the tenure and knowledge that they threw out, that they
For
straight
sure.
up discarded during that was, I'm going to just use the word appalling. Sort of a what are you doing kind of a thing that they pulled off. There was a note, and I don't know if I saw it in a news article or somebody's personal retelling, that basically that Nadella has gone so far in on AI that the order that went down was basically like AI to the exclusion of all else. And I'm probably oversimplifying that, but it really feels that way. And I do think that's going to kind of help color how we talk about this great repatriation thing that we're about to jump into. Is the sort of decision making that goes into, let's take people with 12 plus years institutional knowledge and just throw them out on the street.
Yeah. It's unfortunate to see. You and I both know multiple people were over at Microsoft that have been impacted, right? Like you said, it seems to be the decision is AI to the exclusion of all else. And, I'm not going to name any names or anything, but there's one person I know that 17 years experience at Microsoft was sitting in security. I mean, Paul and I just got done talking about the Secure Future Initiative. Microsoft gave an update back in May. I'll link that episode in the show notes, folks, in case you guys are interested. But security was supposed, and I'm sure it still is supposed to be a big priority. But I always scratch my head whenever I see folks from security, especially, being let go. Right? People let go in the Azure product groups that I've seen. I mean, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy. I agree with you, my friend. So it's unfortunate to see. And yeah, should be some interesting parallels with our topic today. So before I move on to my item, anything else you want to add?
No, go ahead.
Okay, sounds good. Well, as folks who watch the show know, I typically look at things with a cybersecurity lens because I sit in the cybersecurity industry, right? And the news item that caught my eye for this particular week came out on May 21st. So there is a new attack out there called Bad Successor. Basically, it's something that Akamai researchers discovered in delegated managed service accounts inside of Windows Server 2025. And essentially what this attack allows attackers to do is to do privilege escalation with users in Active Directory. So if you're not familiar with what delegated managed services accounts are, basically what these are is it allows users to inherit access from a different account. Basically, this feature was designed to ease the management burden of service accounts, right? Well, researchers at Akamai discovered that this can be exploited to basically give any user the permissions of a given service account. And so, if there's a service account that has a high degree of permissions within the environment, they can very trivially, that's a hard word to say, they can very trivially give their user access to whatever that service account has access to. Now, again, granted, this means that the attacker has to have some sort of foothold in the environment already. But as we've seen time and time again, that's not super difficult for attackers these days. So I'm going to link this report in the show notes. That way folks can take a look at it. But the one thing that really stood out to me here, so it works with the default configuration, is trivial to implement, and in 91%, I'm quoting the article, in 91% of the environments we examined, we found users outside the domain admins group that had the required permissions to perform this attack. In 91% of environments. Now, I don't know how large their sample size was, but 91% is 91%, so anyway. So yeah, be on the lookout for that one, folks. Unfortunately, there are no patches at this point in time. And the only mitigation I've seen mentioned is alert on the creation of delegated managed service accounts.
There are more, fortunately. And I do have a lot of questions too for the places that are really burning down. And I don't even know, are there any that are actually burning down from this? I don't know that. But when I use service accounts, they typically have almost no powers in the domain. They have a lot of power over a service, which is why we use them. But within the domain, they're usually not any more powerful than a user. So sure, you can burn down this one thing, but okay, good for you, I guess. We'll just change it kind of feels like you should have already limited the splash radius on this before you even really got going. But maybe people do different things and have different purposes. I don't want to. Let me be careful about. I don't intend to trash anybody here who has a very, very good reason for it. One of the things you can do is as you said, they're getting the power of that DMSA. So that's where you go. Is what can that DMSA do? Does it need that power? If it's a domain admin, you already have a problem. I really, really cannot see a good reason to ever let any service account have domain admin powers.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd like to be countered on that. Maybe there is one, but I'm unaware of it. So one thing I read is make sure that on its create objects power, it can just create computers. That's all it can do. Don't let it create any other type of object. That's a really great way to kind of step on this right out of the humans should be responsible for creating objects, in my opinion. I don't even know that I want it creating computer accounts. But we are talking about, delegation, so on and so forth. Maybe there's
Right.
a good reason for it, but that's one great place to start. So really just uh, take a look at what your DMSAs are able to do
Yep.
and say, okay, if I was called in front of my organizational security board, or I was on a podcast with Andy and Andy asked me, why did I do that? What's my answer going to be?
Right.
And that's how you should approach this. So there's your mitigation, is make sure the powers that might be stolen are, at the end of the day, are they necessary at all even?
Yep.
And maybe
And
just
that's
stop using DMSAs until you are certain.
until there's a fix. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's all fantastic advice. I will say I'm kind of paraphrasing the article. But they ask some interesting questions here, right? They talk about this delegation process. They refer to it as DMSA migration, right, for escalating the privileges. And some of the questions that they go into in this article is, okay, how does it, the KDC, how does it decide which account to copy from? Can that be influenced? Can it be abused? So they even went into the idea of like, okay, are we linking to this account specifically to this managed service account, or can you somehow influence it grabbing other account permissions using the same process? So,
That would finish that part I hadn't read on. So
yeah, so this be an interesting one to take a look at. Again, from what I've read so far, I think it's exactly as we've talked about so far. It's taking a standard user account and giving it the permissions of a target DMSA. But the researchers asked some really interesting questions. So again, I'll link this in the show notes, folks, so you can take a look at this. This was an interesting read that really stood out to me. So anyway, time for our next segment, and that is, I guess, what I'm calling a nerd hour. And where this comes from, it's not going to take a whole hour, but I had an old work buddy, Scott was his name, and me and a bunch of engineers that I worked with, we would sit around at various points of the day and we would just start talking about various IT things, right? Oh, hey, this new feature from VMware, or hey, yeah, this new thing over here in Windows File Services, right? And so he was a project manager. He wasn't super technical, but he'd walk in and we'd be having these conversations. He'd be like, "Oh God, it's nerd hour again." It was just kind of the running joke. So Scott, if you're watching this, yeah, thanks, buddy. I still think of that. Anyway, so yeah, nerd hour. This is basically where we see, talk about the nerdy things that we've been working on recently. And for me, I don't know how nerdy it is, but I have been working on getting a newsletter configured for the show. So once it is ready, and I'm hoping by the time this episode goes out, it will be available. You can reach it at newsletter.sysadminweekly.com. And basically, it's hosted by Substack. And I was surprised, I guess I would say, at the level of technical setup on the back end for this particular service. And in order to configure it with a custom domain as well, instead of using the .substack.com domain, it was an interesting process, right? So, and I did some tinkering with Cloudflare at the time too. So maybe there was more to it than was really necessary, and that's on me. But anyway, that's kind of the stuff that I've been working on lately. Now, Eric, I know you just recently bought a house, so you've been super busy. So I can't imagine you've been doing nerdy stuff lately, unless you've been, reading all the fine-grained paperwork associated with buying a house. Maybe some people would think nerdy. I'm not sure.
fortunately have a partner in law who is able to deal with that and that part of it. So no, it's any nerdy stuff I'm doing is mainly writing about nerdy stuff and trying to have so many. Yeah, you know how busy my life is right now. I'm not
Oh
getting
yeah.
anything of note done.
No, no worries. No worries. Well, with that, let's jump into our main topic today. And again, we are talking about the cloud repatriation movement. The idea, not even an idea, the fact that in some cases, there are organizations and people out there taking workloads that have been hosted in the cloud and pulling them back to on premises, right? And the big question I asked myself when I started digging into this was like, okay, is this real? Is there data, or is this clickbait, right? Because there's clickbait out there that would, you know, love to make you think the cloud is fire and brimstone and the end of all things and blah de blah, right? And so what I found in some of my research was, you know, is this happening en masse? Not really. What I found is that there are some notable organizations that are shifting large amounts of workloads, but by and large, what I've seen is that not everything is being pulled back to on-premise. Certain workloads are being pulled back either because of cost or because of latency purposes, right? Performance purposes. And I think this lines up with what you and I have talked about over many beers and coffees over the years, Eric, and that is the right tool for the right workload, right? I have never been, and I don't think you are either. I've never been an admin where I'm like cloud everything, or on-premise everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to host the workload where it makes the most sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this is the industry correcting itself from going too far, the pendulum swinging too far to the cloud side, right? And I want to highlight some data points here. And I'm going to link these in the show notes so you folks can take a look at them. In 2024, Barclays CIO survey cited that 83% of enterprise CIOs plan to repatriate at least some workloads in 2024. The Flexera State of the Cloud Report 2024, about 21% of cloud workloads have already been repatriated by enterprises. So that strikes me as 21% of the workloads that were already there have been repatriated back to on-premise.
Mm-hmm.
Geico pulled workloads back to on-prem in order to address a $300 million a year cloud cost, and they cited latency issues as well too. And that the source there was a interview with a Geico VP and published via industry media. Called out cloud storage as, quote, one of the most expensive things you can do, unquote. And I think part of this comes back for me is like, I've seen so many organizations try to take things exactly as they are on-prem and just move them into the cloud, and that's not going to be the most cost-effective way of doing things. Now, I have to believe an organization as large as Geico, they did their due diligence to use modern cloud technologies for the workloads. But again, I don't know that based on this. Just looking through a couple of the other data points here. Let's see, the IDC Assessing Repatriation Report in 2024, 80% of orgs expect to repatriate compute or storage workloads within 12 months. And just seeing if there's anything else I want to call out here. Let's see. Yeah, this one as well, too. So this one's specific to the UK. UK companies, 25% of them have already repatriated over half their cloud workloads as of 2023. So that one's a little dated. That came from the Citrix Hybrid Cloud Study on the UK sector deep dive. So again, I'm going to put all these sources in the show notes for you folks to take a look at. But Eric, any initial thoughts? I know I threw a lot of data points out there, but I want to see what you think.
I have a lot. So I realize as I pick up on new concepts, then they like integrate into the way I talk and do things. So I want to kind of throw out there the concept of what is called the true believer. And this is somebody who looks at a person, a concept, a process, a technology, something, anything, it doesn't matter what, and they are all in on that to the exclusion of all else.
Right.
For a very long time, the cloud narrative was driven by the true believers who were like, you have to put everything on cloud by Tuesday or you're a bad human. And we're not going to hear any arguments counter. It's all wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. There are a few people at Microsoft, I feel like that, especially. And part of it is they're trying to drive, that's a big revenue thing for Microsoft is Azure. So I'm not entirely but I've run into a couple times of talking to those people, and I'm like, you need to hear me on this. And they're not hearing me. What they're listening for is that excuse to go, yeah, I hear you, but. And like, then you didn't hear me.
Right.
So always watch out for true believers. And the same thing for the on-prem people. Some folks are like, I will never put anything in the cloud, no matter what. On-prem is the only thing. Everything Microsoft or Amazon or whatever, everything they do is pure evil all the time, no matter what. And yeah, see, those are the true believers in the other direction. And it is exactly what you said. Everything has its proper place and time. And some things belong in the cloud, some things belong on-prem. It's not going to be the same from org to org. You know,
Yep.
yeah, to do it correctly, yes. So you're the first thing, and we talked about this previously in a different episode, in that there was a huge thing in the very beginning that capex can be difficult to come up with. When you walk into the money people and say, I need $500 million for this project, and they're like,
Right.
Okay, but you really got to sell us. Whereas they came in and said, well, we can do it in OpEx instead, which for people not familiar, CapEx is short for capital expenditure, which means spending a whole lot of money all at once. So buying hardware and services, installation or consulting or whatever to get new things in, something you might do, say, if you're switching to any other platform. And if you're going from on-prem to cloud and you're doing it in a hurry, then that is going to be an example. But OpEx, on the other hand, is operational expenditure, in which we just have a budget of some money, and it kind of usually flexes in most organizations, and we just spend that on a rotating basis every month, every quarter, whatever, however your stuff is set up. Most orgs work monthly off a monthly budget, and
Right.
so that's how the Azure stuff bills. And AWS, I believe all of them, they bill on where they can, they bill monthly. So you have shifted from we need millions of dollars every couple of years to we need thousands of dollars every month, which at first was easy for the money folks to accept. Okay, I get you. That's fine. It makes it a little bit easier to predict realistically, instead of saying, well, we're going to have all this money in a few years. Well, we can smooth that out. But what has happened is people are coming back and going, but our OpEx totals are so far above what our CapEx totals were that you burned it all. We have no money left. We gave it all to Amazon and to Microsoft and whoever else.
Right.
So that is really one of the things that I think your Geico source is basically hitting on that, wait a minute, and also probably true what you were saying, that they were doing the wrong thing. They were trying to lift and shift. I don't think I've ever seen anything more expensive than IaaS. I think it just blows my mind how expensive it is
Yeah.
to run a virtual machine on a cloud platform. It's,
Very expensive.
why are you doing that? Why would you ever do that? And then people will give you answers that make sense, like, oh, well, because if I were to do, let's say I need a 10,000 virtual machines tomorrow, I can't do that on-prem. I can't do that with a CapEx. I can't
Yeah.
get that hardware in here this fast. I can do it in the cloud. Okay, but why are you doing it so often that you're spending something is
Right.
there's a thing here. I get that on demand kind of thing, but you're not. It seems like they're not. And now, of course, it's all come back to, well, maybe we didn't turn those virtual machines off, and we probably should have. Maybe we should have figured out a different way to do that. If you're talking about SaaS, on the other hand, I think SaaS expenditures are usually more intelligent.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to have your numbers broken down, where you're talking about what are they repatriating? Have they decided SaaS isn't the way to go? Because I've seen some things as a customer, like there's some Citrix SaaS stuff that I'm just not happy with it. I don't like the way it works. And I don't like that I have no say in it anymore. So now, like, all the stuff is done at Citrix, and like, I don't want you to change this feature. Where before I could say, I'm just not going to upgrade to the next version because I don't like that. With
Right.
SaaS, you don't get that. You don't have that option. It's just you wake up the next day and, oh, look at all the new stuff we did. You didn't
Yeah.
ask me if I wanted that. So it'd be interesting to see how that's breaking down too.
Yeah. And one thing you said reminded me of something I've come across multiple times. That phrase, oh, maybe I should have turned off these virtual machines. I can't tell you how many times throughout my career I've done what you would call a cloud audit, right? Okay, what do you have running in Azure? It seems like most of the time I've been working on Azure, so I'm going to use that as my example. But you have all this stuff running in Azure. Do you need it all? Is it all doing something? I can't tell you how many times I would find thousands of dollars a month and spend that running things that they didn't even use.
Yeah.
This virtual machine that somebody stood up for a project, then the project got canceled or paused or whatever. It's just been sitting out there for months, racking up dollars, right?
Big dollars.
Yeah, exactly. So I've come across that multiple times. And the other thing I've seen is cloud sprawl. And you kind of alluded to this a little bit, right? When you're talking about the bean counters, right? When you come to them with, hey, this is going to what our OpEx cost is going to be. It's going to be I don't know, $5,000 a month, right? What inevitably happens is the engineering team starts getting into it. They start setting up whatever it is they're setting up, and oh yeah, we need this thing over here, or we undersized this, so we need to make it bigger, or oh, we need this service as well too. Hey, that would be really useful. Let's add that, and before you know it, your OpEx cost is not $5,000; it's $10,000 a month now, right? So I think there's a lot of that going on as well too, based on what I've seen over the years. So.
And it's interesting how I'm gonna relate this to something that drove me insane is when IBM ran everything. You would buy, air quote, buy a physical server and bring it into your house, and it would have 8 CPUs in it, but you could only use 4 because that's all you paid for.
Right.
Then you had to send them a check if you wanted to use any more CPU, right? And it's like it was hard for my brain, like, but I bought the entire thing and it's all here.
Yeah.
What is that about? Well, it seems like cloud now is taking that precise concept and instead of bringing it here, it's over here. I paid for it already, and now I got to pay for it again because I want to use it. So it seems like every little single thing in all of these, and I can pick on any cloud vendor you throw out here. It's like every little thing has a price tag associated with it, which is a problem because for me sitting here as an admin, I don't have the permission to spend money from the organizationally. And part of it is a lot of people don't know this, but what makes people in the C-suite, with executive titles different is they can sign contracts on behalf of the company. I can't do that. I cannot sign a contract, and as an admin, you don't have that power. You can sign things, but they don't have the force of, the exec saying, well, he can't sign on behalf of the company. He doesn't have that power, right? That's segmented in certain ways. So I'm sitting here like, well, I need this feature to do my job.
Right.
So I can go into Azure now and flip the switch. And now I've committed us to paying for things that ordinarily I can't do because so you get into some really weird things that I have always kind of put me off against the cloud is now there's this entire extra layer that goes on with expenses, spending money, deciding who can do what, how, when, where, why, that you didn't have with on-prem stuff.
Right.
You can almost turn that into an episode. I should probably stop right there. But it's caused me a lot of heartache in certain places where, we have politicized things, internal politics, corporate politics that should never be politicized. And we've also paywalled off things that I think, no, you should just get that.
Right. The one thing you said, flipping the switch inside of the Azure UI, it's so easy to flip that switch. That's part of the problem too, right? It's like, we need a bigger VM. Drop down, new size, apply. I mean, I remember what we used to go through for change control for on-premise workloads.
Mm-hmm.
It takes more discipline to do it for the cloud because things are so easy to scale up and out, right? So couple other issues I see in my research and what I've seen personally for workloads coming back to on-prem. We already mentioned latency sensitive applications. You have more control on-prem, right? So there's an added layer of predictability in terms of performance. And we haven't even talked about data sovereignty yet, right? Or compliance reasons. There might be compliance reasons or data sovereignty reasons why you have to run workloads on-prem too. So no surprises there, right? I don't think there's any surprises there. So the next area I wanted to focus on here is I don't want this to seem like all fire and brimstone, like, the evil, bad cloud, move away from it, right? No, that's not what we're talking about at all. There are areas where the cloud still wins, right? And I see that as the elasticity and burst capacity. So those situations where Microsoft uses this example all the time, and I use it too when I'm explaining this because it's such a good example, right? I run a retail website, right? And every, I don't know, August, I run a huge sale. So I know that my traffic is going to double or triple in August. And with cloud services like Azure, I can just scale that up to match that demand, right? It's so hard to replace that convenience on premises, because you have to procure hardware, you have to get it installed, you have to manage it, blah, 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 blah. Couple other areas, right? We've already talked about this a little bit, and that is the PaaS and SaaS services in the cloud. I'm thinking things like, managed SQL, API gateways, machine learning platforms, AKS, the Azure Kubernetes service, right? There's so many PaaS and SaaS features and capabilities inside of cloud ecosystems that would be extremely difficult to replicate on-prem. Maybe AKS is a bad example because now you can do AKS on-prem using Azure Local. Check out the Azure Local episode. I think that was the second episode. Anyway, my point stands. Anything I didn't cover there, Eric?
Well, I'm not going to jump on those yet because yes, but you're going to hit them in your next little section here. So let's keep rolling and we can tie it all together nicely.
So my next section, I wanted to make sure we focused on, how do I say it? It's not all kittens and rainbows coming back to that on-premises data center, right? There are hidden costs. And you mentioned one of them already, Eric, and that is the fact that you're going to have this whiplash effect of capital expenditure again, right? So your accounting department's gotten used to paying that monthly bill. Now you're going to turn around and ask them for $500,000 of hardware. That's going to snap some heads, right? So I think that CapEx revival, as difficult a pill it is to swallow, the large OpEx costs, I think that's going to cause some drama within some organizations.
100%. 100%, especially because if they already feel like their OpEx is inflated and they're barely staying above water, and now you're like, oh, guess what? We can stop that with this gigantic CapEx. Like, oh, really?
More pain to stop the pain, right?
Yes, yes. And in that note, I don't see it in your list here, but the bringing your data out then is going to get an egress charge.
Oh, yes. Excuse me.
So it's interesting how that worked. Ingress is free, egress is not free.
I know exactly why it's set up that way, right? It's to make the cost of offboarding more painful than the cost of onboarding, right? And so it's...
And the thing I say all the time is change only comes when the pain of staying the same exceeds the pain of change. And as long as that egress bill is there, the pain of change stays pretty high.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Another hidden cost I see here is, I see a lot of organizations forget about this actually. And that is, if you've been a cloud organization for 10, 15, 20 years, you don't have administrators that are familiar with on-premises administration.
Well, the good news for you and for some other people that we can think of is that Microsoft just let a lot of really smart people go. So if you need some administrators, we can probably find you a lot. And
very true.
Let me put that hot tip out there: is those folks are good folks who are really would do well with a good employer. So,
yep, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Agreed. And that skill shift is real.
Huge real.
I don't remember when it was. It was a couple years back. I was sitting in a team meeting. This is back when I was still in my MSP days. But I remember one of the, I can call them youngins now because I've got the gray hair in my beard. But basically talking about how they have no idea how on-prem Active Directory works, or on-prem file servers, because that's not what they learned in their training. Mm-hmm. They are cloud administrators, and on-premises administration is completely foreign to them. So
alien, yeah, 100%.
And that I remember, like, I don't know, I felt really old in that moment because I'm just like, whoa, there's people that have no idea how we did things on-prem, right? So anyway.
And
To
it's kind of fun too to show them because there are things like I really feel like I've said this for a long. I don't think Microsoft understands just how much of a killer app that Active Directory is.
oh, right.
I think even as the people who create it and put it out there, they don't get it. And then I also think that as it has evolved there internally, I think a lot of the people at Microsoft who kind of got it are gone now and aged out of the system in a lot of ways, places. So when you look at what Active Directory can do and then compare it to what you get in Azure, Azure still is decades behind in so many ways, and because they don't get it, because Microsoft themselves, as the owner of Active Directory, do not understand what it can do
Right.
for an organization, and
Right.
you cannot yet replace that with any cloud solution. Period.
No.
And I'm going to say something super controversial here, but I also believe that Active Directory and its power, the reason that Linux has never really taken over in a way that maybe you could argue it should have. But
I can see
directory
that.
services are dull and they're boring. But if your directory is no good, then everything else is no good.
Yep.
And that's the thing. Linux has no answer to the directory because just like the people who own it cannot see its value, the people competing against it don't really understand how Active Directory holds up
Yeah.
so much of the infrastructure that we all depend on.
Yeah, for
So it
sure.
is kind of nice taking cloud admins and go, let me show you something. As somebody who kind of has drunk the Kool-Aid on what a good directory service can do, let me show you something. Come here and look at this. And I think in my case, it helps a lot that I went through the NDS, the Novell Directory Services, and that's where Microsoft won. That right there is where
Right.
Microsoft put Novell to bed. Was
Yep. And I
Novell
was
tried.
It's
They
funny you
tried.
mentioned it's funny you mentioned Novell because I was going to bring up Novell because to my knowledge, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Eric, to my knowledge, Novell was really the only viable competitor to Active Directory that I can think of ever.
Yes, and of course, Novell was the Microsoft of their time in the networking space. It wasn't anybody Unix, and that's the fight that we always get into is, oh, Unix ran the world. Well, but in the networking space, Novell ran the world. Novell was the game to beat, and Microsoft beat them, and they did it with Active Directory
Yeah.
because Novell's directory was okay, but it wasn't great.
Right.
And Active Directory, all warts and all. It's not like
Oh,
I could sit here and tell you that Active Directory because it's not. But it was the best. It really
it
was the best
was.
and has stayed the best. And part of it is people are not recognizing what Active Directory really is and what it can do in its full
Oh,
extent,
yeah.
just how important it is. And until somebody does that, Microsoft will remain number one
Yep.
in on-prem data centers for sure. So
Yep.
I've taken a
I
lot of time on that. I apologize. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I can completely agree that AD is the best because I remember, again, gray hair and the beard. I remember managing group-wide, Novell group-wide servers
Oh
back in the
yeah.
day.
Oh,
And so you had to dig into their directory services sometimes. And there were days where many expletives were hurled at the monitor because of those experiences. And AD was just easier, right?
so
So,
much so much. It took something because if you ever and a lot of it, I don't want to split this hair too hard because some people go, well, it's just LDAP. Okay, well, no, not really. But LDAP is what holds a lot of Active
uh-huh.
Directory up, and LDAP is not easy. Even when you recognize and understand LDAP, it's still pretty hard.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's exactly what we just said. Is Active Directory makes the LDAP portion of it easier, and
Yep.
then it's also these other things that we haven't even brought up yet.
Well, it's
That
all the secret sauce that's piled on top, right? I mean,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. It is. I would say from DNS basically runs the world in its own way. I think if you then step up one tier, then Active Directory or directory services is what is the next thing. So if
Yeah.
your DNS is no good, then throw it all out, even if it's not TCP/IP based. Whatever your networking thing is, DNS is what makes it for TCP/IP, in my opinion, and probably not
Yep.
going to get too many people wanting to fight about that. And
I would
yeah,
hope not.
directory services then is that next tier. That
Yep.
if your directory is no good, it doesn't matter how good the rest of it is, which
Yep.
is why Linux doesn't rule the world right now.
Well, it rules the world in some areas, I will say, but
But you
agreed.
follow what I'm getting at, though.
Blanket
You
agree.
follow it
Yes.
as there are certain places where I won't wouldn't even consider using something other than
Correct.
Linux. But
I'm thinking
why
things
is
like,
Linux not the kernel of choice in every single
yep,
application? Almost
yep,
certainly I can say if it's not a vendor requirement, it's that Active Directory thing is going to get you every time. It's like,
for
wow, they're
sure.
great at what it does. So
For sure. And when I said that, I'm thinking things like web servers, right? When I need to stand up a web server, sorry, Microsoft, I rarely think of IIS. Like
yeah,
instantly I'm like Apache, you know?
I
So
think we should probably have another episode on that too, because I do remember at one point where IIS was like just absolutely eating Apache's lunch on almost every single metric.
yeah, I remember
But
those
then
days.
I noticed too that I still go to Apache just because I don't know how to do things in IIS easily, like the basics of, yeah, okay, I connect a directory to a file. Sure, that part I can do, but like I was looking at the other day, so I'm like, I need to see if TLS 1.2 is running here. I know how to do that in Apache quickly. You just go to the requisite
Right.
configuration file, and there it
Right.
is. And then in IIS, it's like, no, you got to look at the OS, but then also there's this, yeah, okay,
It's a whole thing.
that's a whole thing. Exactly.
It's a
So,
whole thing.
yeah,
So, we're kind of running out on time here, Eric. I think there's a whole other episode here specifically around what makes Microsoft on-prem tools so strong, so powerful, right? We'll get to that. We're gonna have an episode about that, and then one about Apache versus IIS too. That sounds good too. Anyway, I want to tie this all together, and I think what all of the statistics I listed off earlier, all those sources that I'm going to put in the show notes, I think what all of this shows is that hybrid is the new normal. I think Microsoft and you know Amazon and Google, they would all love to have everybody's all of everyone's workloads in the cloud.
hmm,
That's not realistic, right?
that's not.
Most realistic is going to be the fact that some workloads are going to be running on-prem. Those latency sensitive workloads, those compliance sensitive workloads, the data sovereignty sensitive workloads, or those workloads that just cost way too much to run in the cloud, right?
I'm going to throw. I hope we're still friends after this. I'm going to throw an 11th hour wrench in here. There's also a place at which neither the on-prem nor the cloud is the way to go, and a straight up hosted solution, traditional hosted solution, is the best way to go. Like for our website, for
Oh
instance,
yeah,
why
yeah.
would I run that in Azure? That's way too. No, that's insane. I'm not going to do that. And why would I run that in my house? So that's also insane. I'm not going to do that either. But running it hosted, perfect solution. So
That's
yeah,
true. There are
three
some.
choices here.
That's true. We haven't talked about colo or hosted yet. I kind of lump those in the same bucket, right?
Agreed.
Um, but then we could bring in the Azure static web apps into the discussion too. Those are super cheap, but that's a whole different thing. I think sounds like we need to have a web hosting episode. So there we go. But no, good thing. I have a buddy that is really deep into the colo game. Might be interesting to get him on the show.
There you go.
That could be interesting. Anyway, I'm deviating. So hybrid is going to be the new normal, right? I don't think there's any surprises there. There actually has been a lot of work done by the open source community, third-party vendors to help manage those hybrid environments, right? I'm thinking of things like, unified monitoring tools, Prometheus plus Grafana. You've got Azure Arc, which is Microsoft's, right? That's not a monitoring tool, but allows you to manage on-prem resources through the same control plane as your cloud resources. You've got, infrastructure as code, Ansible, Terraform. I'm going to have our good friend Luke on, by the way, to talk about infrastructure as code. So that should be fun. And yeah, you have directory resources that can, I don't want to say cleanly span on-prem and the cloud, because I don't see it super well done yet. But I mean, you do have things like Entra ID that does have some on-premise sync, right? So I mean, I think the vendors, the powers that be, have also come to the same conclusion that hybrid is probably going to be the place where everybody lands when this whole cloud thing is, all the dust is settled, right?
Because the one thing that a cloud can never do is your people, wherever they are, they're closer to your premises than they are to the work is being done outside of Azure. The work is being
Right.
done outside of AWS. That's not where the work is being done. It may be the background or something, whatever, but you still have to have compute power and all sorts of things right there available. And it's easy for me to say that working in a healthcare environment because I don't want the systems that keep my baby monitors. I don't want them to have a long dependency chain, certainly not across
Right.
continents.
Right. For sure. For sure. Well, anything else you want to add, Eric, before we wrap this up? I think we've exhausted the topic for today.
We have.
Sounds good. Well, good having you as always, my friend. We always have great conversations. So I think you and I have an upcoming episode on GitHub Copilot. So that should be a fun one. Looking forward to having you
Absolutely.
on for that one, my friend. So, and those of you watching, appreciate you spending some time with us today. I know you have very busy days as sysadmins, so appreciate you spending some of that, some of that very valuable time with us, I should say. And so, if you're watching us on the YouTubes, don't forget to like and subscribe. I hate myself every time I say that, but that's what you have to do for the YouTube, right? Like, smash that like and subscribe button. We are also available out on all the major podcasting platforms. That includes Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Amazon. And also, I'm hoping I have it ready. I'm going to say this, assuming I'm going to have it ready. We do have a weekly newsletter at newsletter.sysadminweekly.com.
You just
That
put
one,
yourself on the clock.
I did. I put myself on the clock. It's almost ready. It should be ready by the time this goes out. Anyway, appreciate you folks. Let you get back to your day. Stay safe out there. We'll catch you again next week for another episode of SysAdmin Weekly. Have a good one.